Chapter 4. Arrival. The address Kirsch had given him turned out to be in a neighborhood so aggressively ordinary that Pruitt spent 2 minutes convinced he had made a wrong turn. Ranch houses, tidy, kept lawns, a woman walking a dog the size of a throw pillow. He rolled past the Carter house once before he parked, studying it through the passenger window the way he would study a paper before deciding whether it was worth citing. Well-maintained. Small front porch with 2 chairs angled toward each other. Wind chime by the door. Copper pipes, hand-cut, uneven lengths. In the right wind, it rang soft and low, each pipe finding its own time. A basketball hoop in the driveway with no net, the rim slightly bent. The yard had been recently mowed. He sat in the rental car for a moment with the engine off. Atlanta traffic had been an experience. The air here was somehow thicker and more wet than the air in Baltimore in the summer, and he could already feel his shirt beginning to lose its convictions. He got his bag from the back seat, took a breath of the warm Georgia afternoon, and walked up the front path. He was 3 steps from the porch when the door opened. Hash, hash, hash. The woman who opened it, Denise Carter, 45, according to Kirsch's file, did not look like she had been waiting. She looked like she had been watching, which was different. She had his measure before he reached the top step, and whatever she concluded, she kept it behind her eyes. "Dr. Pruitt," she said. Not a question, not entirely a greeting. "Ms. Carter." He extended his hand. She shook it, brief, firm, assessing. Then she stepped back and let him in. The house was cool and dim after the afternoon light, and he stood for a moment while his eyes adjusted. The living room was to the left. It was a comfortable room, clearly lived in. A couch with a worn throw blanket at one end. A coffee table with a stack of books and a vase. A television that appeared to have been off for some time. He noticed, without quite meaning to, that the furniture was arranged along the walls more than was typical for a room this size. The center of the space was open, clear. He noticed other things. A letterboard on the side table by the couch. Laminated, the letters worn at their centers from years of use. A small collection of fidget objects on the windowsill, organized by type. A hand-lettered sign on the wall near the hallway. "Today is," a whiteboard beside it, currently blank. Denise Carter watched him take all of this in. "Dr. Marsh is in the living room," she said. Hash, hash, hash. Dr. Marsh had the look of someone who had spent a long time being allowed in rooms, rather than invited to them. She stood when he came in, not as a courtesy, but as an assessment. She needed to see him before she decided anything. He recognized the impulse. Kirsch had mentioned her name when he briefed Pruitt in Baltimore. Pruitt had looked her up on the flight down. Johns Hopkins training, the same program, different decades, a publication record that had been strong before it became controversial. A Meridian connection that the official record described as consultative, and that Pruitt suspected was something more. He had read 2 of her papers on the plane. The methodology was sound. The conclusions had gotten her into trouble. They shook hands. Neither of them offered first names. "Kirsch gave me the broad strokes," Pruitt said. "I'd rather hear your version." "My version," Dr. Marsh said, "is considerably less broad." "Good," he said, and got out his notebook. Denise Carter sat across from them both. "My version is less broad than hers," she said. 17 years of it." Pruitt looked at her. "Deon will be nearby," she said. "While we wait, what exactly did Kirsch tell you?" Hash, hash, hash. He heard Deon before he saw him. Not sound exactly. More the quality of the house changing. A presence, somewhere past the hallway. Denise glanced briefly toward the kitchen doorway. "He'll be nearby," she said. It wasn't an explanation so much as a fact about how this worked. From where Pruitt sat, he could see part of the kitchen threshold, enough to register someone there. Deon Carter was tall. Pruitt had not expected that. He was 17 in the file, but he had the frame of someone still arriving at his adult self. Long and lean and not entirely certain where all of it ended. He wore a gray t-shirt and joggers and had headphones resting around his neck. He had positioned himself just inside the kitchen doorway, letterboard under his arm, and he looked at Pruitt with an expression that was not hostile and not warm and not neutral. It was simply patient, in the way that something very certain can afford to be patient. Pruitt had been in clinical settings with non-speaking individuals before. He knew the professional protocols. Address directly, don't talk over, don't perform your comfort or discomfort for the room. He gave Deon a nod, measured, acknowledging. Deon did not return it. He just looked. It went on long enough that Pruitt became aware of it as a length of time rather than just a moment. Then Deon lifted the letterboard and began to move. His finger traveled the laminated surface with a speed that surprised Pruitt. Not slow and searching, but decisive, like someone typing a sentence they had already composed. Denise read aloud without being asked, in the same tone she might read a weather report. "You've already decided." "I'm here to examine the evidence with an open mind," Pruitt said. "That's the function I've been asked to perform." Deon's finger moved again. "I know." Then Deon settled back against the kitchen doorframe and looked at Pruitt with that same patient expression, giving him time to catch up. Pruitt wrote something in his notebook. He was not certain what it meant, but he wrote it anyway. Hash, hash, hash. They worked through the afternoon. Deon staying in the conversation from the kitchen doorway, present but not in the room, which Pruitt came to understand was not absence. It was a different kind of attention. Dr. Marsh walked Pruitt through the clinical record. Behavioral documentation going back 4 years. Communication logs with consistent internal coherence. Corroborated accounts from 11 other families across 7 states. Non-speaking individuals, different ages, different diagnoses, different communication methods, all describing the same thing, with variations so small they suggested not coordination but independent encounter. The thing they described had a name Deon had given it, that all of them appeared to use independently. The fold. Pruitt asked good questions. Marsh answered them without flinching, which meant she had already asked them herself. "The synchronization events," he said. "You're describing simultaneous communication between individuals who have no established contact, no shared language, no prior relationship." "No prior relationship that you can document," Denise said. "That's different from no prior relationship." He looked at her. "They know each other," she said. "Through the fold. They've known each other for years. What they don't have is anything you could put in a chart." Pruitt wrote that down. Deon's finger moved. Denise read, "You're asking the wrong question." "What's the right question?" Pruitt said. Deon spelled again, slower this time, deliberate. "Not how do we communicate. Why can't you?" The room was quiet for a moment. Dr. Marsh said carefully, "He means neurotypicals. The assumption has always been that non-speaking individuals lack something. Deon has been consistent that the deficit runs the other direction." Pruitt looked toward the kitchen doorway. Deon looked back at him with that same patient expression, certain, unhurried, giving him time to catch up. He wrote something else in his notebook. Then, he asked about Meridian. He asked it as a clinical question, the way you ask about a prior study in a literature review. He asked how Deon had come to the project's attention, what the nature of the initial contact had been, whether there was documentation. he hadn't seen. The room changed. Denise set her mug down on the coffee table. The sound of it was very precise. Dr. Marsh went still. From the kitchen doorway, Deon did not move, but something in his expression did. A small shift, a door closing quietly behind his eyes. "That's not a conversation for today," Denise said. Her voice was level and entirely without give. It was not a suggestion. Pruitt made a note to come back to it from a different angle. Hash, hash, hash. He gathered his things an hour later. The sun had moved. Dr. Marsh and Denise Carter walked him to the door. He shook Marsh's hand, then turned to Denise and shook hers. "Thank you for your time," he said. He meant it more than he had expected to. Denise nodded. That same precise look, not warm, not cold, still deciding. He looked toward the hallway. Deon had moved, quietly, on his own terms, to the edge of the living room. He stood there with his letterboard at his side. "It was good to meet you," Pruitt said. Deon's finger moved. Denise read from where she stood by the door. "Come back when you're ready to be wrong." Pruitt stood with that for a moment. Then he nodded, a real one, different from the one he had given at the start, and walked out. On the porch, he stopped. He was not sure why he stopped. The afternoon was still there, still warm and thick and unremarkable. The wind chime moved. He turned to look at it, because there was no wind. There was no wind. He stood looking at the wind chime for 3 or 4 seconds. Then he walked to his car. He did not write it in his notebook.